Hey everyone, it's Rick, and thanks for joining me on another Inwyt Walkabout. It's a beautiful day this weekend. I'm walking on a trail behind my house that we've been on before. Kind of goes between some of the housing complexes in the area. I wanted to talk today a little bit about what I would say are unexpected transitions, particularly the example that I've kind of come across of late related to job loss and having to move on from positions that one's been in for a long time. It reminded me of an experience that I had early in my career along those lines, where I was working overseas, doing a lot of international work while I was based in Boston, and really enjoying what I was doing as far as the work, complex problem solving, in different parts of the world, in the Middle East, in Asia, and so forth. And, I thought things were going along really well when one day, I'd been there probably about 4 or 5 years, my CEO called me into his office and he informed me that due to budget constraints and to a new strategic direction that the group was taking, that my services were no longer needed and that I was effectively being dismissed. Thank you for your service, and good luck with next steps. And it caught me completely off guard because I wasn't expecting it at all. And I was in a situation where I had young kids, I had a house, I was a significant income contributor, and all of a sudden, all of that was removed, and I was in a state of significant uncertainty as far as what I was going to do next. And the reflex was, well, I got to go find another job really fast, or I'm going to be in trouble. My family's going to be in trouble. And long story short, I think it was a moment, an opportunity that really was imposed in a way where I had to step back. There wasn't a quick fix, and where I had to kind of take, not control, but just kind of take in my situation for what it was, and really to let opportunities and the situation define itself. And fortunately, things started to show up. Opportunities that I thought would never have been there all of a sudden were. And it took a while, but I managed to find some interim consulting jobs, some things to do that allowed for some income generation, and had to tap into savings, of course, different things, but made it through probably about a year of non-specific work, where ultimately I found the right position in the right place, and I was back on track, and off we went. So what's the point of sharing this? I think there are many situations of late. We saw this in COVID, but we see this all the time, and particularly in healthcare, where there's so much uncertainty and so much struggle with finances and just trying to course correct a direction that is really off the mark. And a lot of decisions get made for which one can be blindsided, or one can be on the wrong side, if you will, of where leadership thinks we need to go, and so forth. And all of a sudden you find yourself in a space of uncertainty and massive change. And I think one of the things that strikes me when I reflect on my own experience and just that type of dynamic in general is that, for starters, one has to be kind to oneself. I think one of the things that always gets highlighted in these scenarios is how everything that we do is based on comparison and measurement. And I think there's always a tendency for the person who's on the receiving end of a layoff or a dismissal to blame the system and to get angry outwardly. And there are obviously a number of reasons that are justified or not justified to feel that way, but in many ways I think it's an opportunity to also just reflect on the fact that what's happening outwardly is also having an impact on one's own inward response, and that really the control and the opportunity that one has is less about changing the external environment as much as it is observing one's own behavior and one's own measurement, if you will, our own comparison to our performance or how we show up relative to the environment that we're in. And it's a good opportunity to put one's attention where one can have impact. And I think a lot of that, again, is to reflect on the fact that as people are comparing you, making judgments about your abilities, we do the same for ourselves. And the first, I would say, downward step in these types of situations is to feel like one is a failure or that there's something wrong with us, and that all of a sudden we look bad, we're being perceived in a certain way, and all of that is just not helpful, and really in many ways this is so debilitating in the outlook. The other thing that I think comes to mind, again thinking my own situation, is how tethered we are to so many things in our lives that we consider secure. And when these types of things happen, all of a sudden the tether is cut, or the piece that was secure is undone, and all of a sudden you're free floating. And that free float is extremely uncomfortable because we're taught and we essentially are conditioned to anchor ourselves to elements that are supposed to be stable. And work is certainly one of them. There's all kinds of social anchors as well that in these types of settings one starts to realize really are not as secure as they're supposed to be. And again, it throws oneself into considerable disarray and thinking about, now what do I do? And the reflex is always to jump back to find something else to tether to as quickly as possible, without appreciating the uncertainty that anything we anchor ourselves to actually is. So again, I think you have an opportunity that many times is overlooked to actually view the untethering, the release, if you will, as not a scary situation that is absolutely indicative of a free fall or failure, but it's also an opportunity to fly. And it doesn't always seem like it's possible to do that, but many times I think there is opportunity if one is able to take a pause and really reflect on all the tethers that bind us, how freeing it can be to all of a sudden have nothing that we're connected to, or to have one less thing connected to that's supposed to be secure. And perhaps there's an opportunity to reflect on what really matters for oneself, and really to recognize that the uncertainty that we tether ourselves to is probably much less appealing than perhaps recognizing that being untethered and recognizing that one can actually be highly functional in that capacity is actually total security, because one can respond to what's actually going on versus worrying about what could be or what was. So for all of the tension and for all of the challenge that these types of unexpected situations throw us in, there's always some sort of a blessing underneath it, an opportunity to reflect on really the things that we aspire to achieve in our lives, and how the tethering that is supposed to get us to happiness and security really are the constructs for the opposite. And I think there are a lot of situations where that duress actually creates an opening for people to recognize that there's a different way to go. And again, I think it's much more valuable to focus on one's own ability to observe and understand and engage through one's own actions and behavior than it is to look outwardly and either to blame or to expect some kind of security to show up from the outside. Because at the end of the day, it's really our own insecurity that has us reach out for things that really are not secure. So think about that. Think about your colleagues and family. Anybody who friends who are in situations like this, and maybe even yourself, and recognize the opportunity that sits behind the challenges that come from these unexpected life turns, and how taking maybe a more inward approach and a reflective approach that is focused on self-understanding really can create a significant change in outlook and in life. So that's it for today. I hope you all have a wonderful day, a great week, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. One more view as we go here. This is Rick with Inwyt Walkabout. Take care.